The mining station Perseus floated in the cold darkness of space, its metal hull gleaming under the distant light of 3 suns. The massive structure orbited Titan 7, a gas giant rich in helium-3 that powered half the galaxy's energy needs. Today was different from all other days. Today the station hosted the most dangerous ruler in known space. Queen Zara of the Vex Empire had arrived 12 hours ago. Her black warship, the size of a small moon, cast shadows across the station's docking bays. The ship's hull bore the scars of 1,000 battles, and its weapon systems could turn the mining station into dust within seconds. But Queen Zara had come in peace, at least for now. Ben Torres wiped sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the maintenance tunnels beneath Level 7. The human engineer had been working on Perseus Station for 3 years, keeping the old systems running when everyone else said they should be replaced. At 28 years old, Ben was the youngest chief engineer the station had ever hired. He was also the only human among a crew of 200 aliens from 12 different species. The tunnel was barely wide enough for his shoulders. Ben's headlamp cut through the darkness as he checked power couplings and data lines. The station's environmental systems needed constant attention, especially with so many important visitors aboard. The peace talks between the Vex Empire and the Galactic Trade Union could determine the fate of billions of beings across 50 star systems. Ben had never seen a Vex warrior before today. The reptilian alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with scales that could deflect energy weapons and claws sharp enough to cut through steel. Their empire controlled the Outer Rim territories, where they ruled through strength and honor codes that few other species understood. Queen Zara was said to be the fiercest warrior of her generation, undefeated in personal combat for over 20 years. The maintenance work was routine until Ben reached Junction Point 7G. His scanner detected an unusual energy reading from the guest quarters directly above. Ben frowned and checked his readings again. The power fluctuation was small but consistent, like a piece of equipment running inefficiently. Through the transparent aluminum viewing panel in the tunnel ceiling, Ben could see into the guest quarters reserved for Queen Zara. The room was decorated in the stark military style preferred by Vex nobility. Weapon racks lined the walls displaying ceremonial blades and energy rifles. But what caught Ben's attention was the armor stand in the center of the room. Queen Zara's personal battle armor hung on the display like a work of art. The suit was ancient by galactic standards, passed down through generations of Vex royalty. Its black metal surface was covered in intricate patterns that told the story of every battle the armor had survived. Energy conduits ran along the arms and chest like glowing veins, and the helmet's design resembled the skull of some fierce predator. Ben's scanner beeped softly as he focused it on the armor. The energy readings were definitely coming from the suit. Something was wrong with the power distribution system. Ben activated the tunnel's emergency access panel and raised himself. Up to get a better view, what he saw made his, blood run cold. The armor's chest piece showed hairline fractures along the primary stress points. The cracks were barely visible to the naked eye, but Ben's trained eye could see how they followed the natural weak points in the metal. Worse, the power coupling on the back was misaligned by several degrees. Any engineer worth their certification could see that the armor would fail catastrophically if used in combat. Ben lowered himself back into the tunnel and sat in the cramped space, thinking. The smart thing to do was nothing. This was not his responsibility. The Vex had their own engineers and technicians. Queen Zara's personal equipment was certainly maintained by experts who understood Vex technology better than any human ever could. But Ben could not stop thinking about those stress fractures. In his mind, he calculated the forces involved when the armor's power system activated. The chest piece would hold for perhaps 10 minutes of normal use, maybe 5 minutes under combat stress. After that, the metal would fail, and the person inside would be exposed to whatever weapons were being fired at them. Ben had spent his entire adult life fixing things. It was what he did, what he was good at, what gave his life meaning. He fixed fusion reactors and life support systems and artificial gravity generators. He fixed things because leaving them broken was not an option for him. The idea that someone might die because of faulty equipment when he could prevent it made his stomach twist with anxiety. The tunnel seemed to grow smaller as Ben wrestled with his decision. Touching another warrior's personal equipment without permission was a serious offense in Vex culture. Queen Zara might consider it an insult to her competence or even a challenge to personal combat. The peace talks could be ruined. Ben could be arrested or worse. But if he did nothing and Queen Zara was killed by equipment failure during some future battle, Ben would never forgive himself. Ben made his decision. Working in the maintenance tunnels had taught Ben to move quietly and efficiently in small spaces. The station's security systems were designed to keep intruders out, not to monitor the movements of authorized personnel. Ben's engineering codes gave him access to most areas of the station, including the guest quarters maintenance systems. Getting into Queen Zara's room took Ben 20 minutes of careful work. He had to bypass 3 separate security locks and disable the motion sensors without triggering any alarms. His hands shook slightly as he worked, not from fear of the technology but from the magnitude of what he was attempting. The guest quarters were larger than Ben's entire living space. Vex furniture was built for beings much taller than humans, making Ben feel like a child in an adult's room. The weapon displays were impressive and intimidating, but Ben forced himself to focus on the armor stand in the center of the room. Up close, the damage was even worse than he had feared. The stress fractures in the chest piece had been painted over repeatedly, but the underlying metal was failing. Someone had been trying to hide the weakness rather than repair it properly. The power coupling issue was more complex, requiring Ben to trace the energy conduits throughout the entire suit. Ben activated his portable toolkit and got to work. The armor's metal was an alloy he had never encountered before, but the basic principles of materials science were universal. The stress fractures needed to be reinforced with micro-welding and structural supports. The power coupling required complete realignment and several component replacements. Working on the armor was like performing surgery on a living creature. Every component was connected to every other component in ways that were both logical and beautiful. The Vex engineers who had originally designed this suit were masters of their craft. But centuries of use and inadequate maintenance had taken their toll. Ben lost track of time as he worked. The fractures in the chest piece required him to partially disassemble the power distribution network. Each repair revealed 2 more problems that needed attention. The armor's environmental systems were running at 60% efficiency. The helmet's targeting system was miscalibrated. The joint servos in the arms needed lubrication and adjustment. As the hours passed, Ben found himself developing a deep respect for the armor's original designers. The suit was not just protective equipment but a masterpiece of engineering. Every detail served multiple purposes. The decorative patterns on the surface were actually part of the structural support system. The energy conduits were arranged to provide optimal power distribution while maintaining perfect balance. By the time Ben finished his work, the armor gleamed with renewed vitality. The stress fractures were gone, replaced by reinforcement patches that were actually stronger than the original metal. The power coupling was perfectly aligned and the energy readings showed 100% efficiency across all systems. Ben had even taken the liberty of upgrading several components with more modern equivalents that would improve performance without changing the armor's appearance. Ben cleaned up his tools and carefully restored the room to its original appearance. He checked and double-checked his work, running diagnostics on every system he had touched. The armor was not just repaired but improved. It would now perform better than it had when it was first constructed centuries ago. As Ben prepared to leave the guest quarters, he took one last look at the armor. In the soft lighting of the room it looked magnificent and terrible, a symbol of power and authority that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations. Ben felt a strange sense of connection to the unknown Vex engineers who had created this masterpiece so long ago. They would have understood his inability to leave broken things unfixed. Ben made his way back to the maintenance tunnels as quietly as he had come. He restored the security systems and sealed the access panels, leaving no trace of his presence. By the time he returned to his quarters, the station's artificial dawn was beginning to brighten the corridors. Ben tried to sleep, but his mind kept returning to the armor. He had done the right thing, he was certain of that. But he also knew that Queen Zara would notice the changes immediately. Vex warriors were intimately familiar with their equipment, and the improved performance would be obvious from the moment she activated the suit systems. The consequences of his actions would become clear soon. Enough. Ben was awakened 6 hours later by a sound that made his blood freeze. It was a roar of rage that seemed to shake the entire station, a sound of fury that could only have come from the throat of a Vex warrior. The roar was followed by the sound of heavy footsteps in the corridor outside, moving with the deliberate pace of someone looking for answers. Ben dressed quickly and stepped into the corridor. Other station personnel were emerging from their quarters with confused and frightened expressions. The alien crew members were chattering nervously in their various languages, but Ben could see the fear in their eyes regardless of what species they belonged to. "What was that noise?" asked Dr. Mills, the station's chief medical officer. "I think," Ben said quietly, "that Queen Zara has discovered someone has been working on her armor." The footsteps were getting closer. Through the corridor's viewing ports, Ben could see Vex guards taking positions throughout the station. Their weapons were not drawn, but their posture suggested they were ready for trouble. "Who fixed my armor?" The roar came again, closer this time and filled with a rage that made the walls seem to vibrate. Ben took a deep breath and walked toward the sound. His fellow crew members called after him, warning him to stay hidden, but Ben could not bring himself to cower while someone else faced consequences for his actions. Queen Zara stood in the main corridor of Level 7, her massive form dominating the space. She wore the repaired armor, and it gleamed with a perfection that was impossible to ignore. The energy readings on her suit's status display showed peak performance across all systems. Her clawed hands were clenched into fists, and her reptilian eyes blazed with fury as she searched for whoever had dared to touch her ancestral equipment. "I did," Ben said, stepping forward from the crowd of station personnel. "I fixed your armor, Your Majesty." The corridor fell silent except for the soft hum of the station's life support systems. Queen Zara turned her gaze toward Ben, and he felt the full weight of her attention like a physical force. She was magnificent and terrifying, a perfect example of Vex nobility in all its fierce glory. "You," she said, her voice dropping to a low growl that was somehow more frightening than her earlier roars. "A human. You touched the armor of the Vex royal line." Ben nodded, his mouth suddenly dry. "Yes, Your Majesty." The power coupling was misaligned, and there were stress fractures in the chest piece that would have caused catastrophic failure during combat use. Queen Zara's eyes narrowed as she processed this information. Around them, the station crew watched in terrified silence, waiting to see if they were about to witness an execution. Queen Zara stared down at the small human engineer who had just confessed to touching her ancestral armor. The corridor remained silent except for the soft hum of the station's systems. Every alien crew member pressed themselves against the walls trying to become invisible. They all knew that Vex warriors had killed for lesser offenses than this. Ben stood his ground, though his heart hammered against his ribs. The Queen was even more imposing up close. Her scales caught the light like polished metal, and her claws could easily tear through his soft human flesh. But Ben had made his choice, and he would face the consequences. "Show me," Queen Zara commanded. "Your Majesty," Ben asked, confused. "Show me what you claim was wrong with my armor." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Ben glanced around at the watching crowd, then back at the Queen. "The diagnostics panel on your left wrist will show the current status. Compare those readings to the historical data from yesterday." Queen Zara activated the display with practiced ease. Her eyes moved across the scrolling data, and Ben watched her expression change from anger to confusion to something that might have been surprise. The power efficiency readings were 30% higher than they had been in months. The structural integrity showed green across all systems for the first time in years. "These readings," she said slowly, "they are accurate?" "Yes, Your Majesty. Your armor is now performing better than it has in decades, possibly centuries." The Queen's advisor, a smaller Vex male named Commander Crix, stepped forward with his own scanner. "My Queen, this could be a human trick. They are known for their deception in negotiations." Ben felt a flash of irritation. "There's no trick. Your armor had serious flaws that would have gotten you killed in combat. I fixed them because leaving them broken wasn't an option." Commander Crix hissed, showing rows of sharp teeth. "You dare speak so boldly to Vex nobility?" "Commander," Queen Zara said, raising one clawed hand, "let the human explain himself fully before we decide his fate." The crowd of station personnel watched nervously as Ben gathered his thoughts. He knew that his next words could determine not just his own survival, but possibly the success of the peace talks between their species. "In human culture," Ben began, "we have a saying, if you see something broken and you can fix it, you fix it. It doesn't matter who owns it or whether they asked for help. Leaving equipment in a dangerous condition when you have the knowledge and tools to repair it goes against everything I was taught as an engineer." But this armor belongs to the royal line of the Vex Empire, Commander Crix protested. It has been maintained by our finest engineers for generations. Ben nodded respectfully. I'm sure your engineers are skilled, but sometimes an outside perspective can spot problems that familiarity has made invisible. The stress fractures in your chest piece had been painted over repeatedly. Someone knew there was damage but chose to hide it rather than fix it properly. Queen Zara's eyes flashed dangerously. You accuse my engineers of incompetence? No, Your Majesty. I think they were afraid to admit that the royal armor needed major repairs. In their place, I might have made the same choice. But fear of embarrassment doesn't make equipment any less dangerous. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. Around them, the station crew barely dared to breathe. Dr. Mills had moved closer to Ben. Probably planning to provide medical aid when the violence started. You had nothing to gain from this action, Queen Zara observed. In fact, you risked severe punishment. Why? Ben thought about how to explain something that seemed obvious to him, but apparently was not obvious to others. Because it was the right thing to do. If I had done nothing and you were injured or killed because of equipment failure, I would have carried that guilt for the rest of my life. No political consideration is worth that. Commander Crix made a sound of disgust. Humans and their emotional weakness. This proves they cannot be trusted as allies, does it? Queen Zara asked, turning her penetrating gaze on her advisor. Or does it prove something else entirely? She began to pace in the wide corridor, her armored footsteps echoing off the walls. The repaired armor moved with perfect fluid motion, the joint servos operating at peak efficiency. Ben could see that she was testing the improvements he had made, feeling how much better the suit responded to her movements. In Vex culture, she said, speaking to Ben but loudly enough for everyone to hear, strength is the highest virtue. We respect those who can defeat their enemies in fair combat. We honor those who can endure pain without showing weakness. We follow those who can make hard decisions without hesitation. Ben nodded, wondering where this explanation was leading. But there are different kinds of strength, the Queen continued. Physical strength, mental strength, the strength to lead others into battle. She stopped pacing and faced Ben directly, and the strength to do what is right even when it might cost you everything. Commander Crix looked confused. My Queen, I do not understand. This human could have ignored the flaws in my armor. It would have been the safe choice, the smart choice according to most measures. Instead, he risked his life to prevent possible harm to someone he had never met, someone whose people are not allied with his own. Queen Zara's voice grew thoughtful. That is not weakness, Commander. That is a form of strength we have not encountered before. The Queen walked over to a nearby viewing port and gazed out at the stars. Her reflection in the transparent aluminum showed a warrior deep in thought. I have been studying human military history since these peace talks began, she said. Humans are unusual among galactic species. Most races expand through conquest or economic dominance. Humans expand by making friends. They have a saying, no one gets left behind. Even their enemies are treated with medical care after surrender. Ben remained silent, sensing that something important was happening but not wanting to interrupt the Queen's thought process. Our intelligence reports suggested this was human weakness, Queen Zara continued. We believed that humans helped others because they were too soft to make hard choices. But this incident suggests a different interpretation. She turned back to Ben and he saw something new in her reptilian eyes. Not anger or suspicion, but curiosity and perhaps even respect. You helped me not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough to care about the welfare of others beyond your own tribe. This is not weakness. This is a kind of strength that the Vex Empire has never developed. Commander Crix stepped forward urgently. High Queen, surely you are not suggesting that human emotionalism is superior to Vex discipline. I am suggesting, Queen Zara said firmly, that strength takes many forms. Physical power can conquer territory, but the power to inspire loyalty, to make others want to help you succeed, that is far more valuable in the long term. She activated her armor's communication system and spoke in the rapid, clicking language of the Vex. Ben could not understand the words, but he could hear the authority in her voice. Within minutes, Vex guards began arriving in the corridor, but their posture was formal rather than threatening. I have summoned the other negotiators, Queen Zara announced. The peace talks will resume immediately, but with new terms. Your Majesty? Asked Station Commander Phillips, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing amazement. The original proposal was for a limited trade agreement between our peoples, the Queen explained. But I now believe that humans offer something far more valuable than trade goods. They offer a different way of thinking about strength and cooperation. She looked directly at Ben. Human engineer Ben Torres, I hereby name you honorary advisor to the Vex Royal Engineering Corps. Your people's tendency to fix what is broken extends far beyond machinery. I believe. The corridor erupted in surprised murmurs from the watching crew. Ben stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Your Majesty, I'm honored, but I'm not qualified to advise an entire star empire on anything. Queen Zara's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. You are qualified to see problems that others miss and brave enough to fix them regardless of personal risk. That is exactly the qualification I need. Over the following hours, the peace talks transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. The Vex Empire, known throughout the galaxy for their warrior pride and isolationist policies, proposed a full military alliance with humanity. Not just trade agreements or non-aggression pacts, but a true partnership between species. The humans have something we lack, Queen Zara explained to the assembled negotiators from both sides. They have the ability to see beyond immediate self-interest. They help others not because they expect reward, but because they believe it is right to do so. The human diplomatic team was stunned. Ambassador Chen, the lead negotiator, had prepared for months to secure even a basic trade agreement. A military alliance had been beyond their wildest hopes. Your Majesty, Ambassador Chen said carefully, this is far more than we expected. What changed your mind? Queen Zara gestured toward Ben, who sat uncomfortable in a chair designed for much larger beings. One of your engineers risked his life to repair equipment belonging to someone he had never met. He gained nothing from this action except the satisfaction of preventing possible harm. This demonstrates a form of thinking that the Vex Empire needs to learn. Commander Crick, still struggling to understand his queen's reasoning, asked for clarification. My queen, how does emotional attachment to strangers benefit an empire? Consider our current territorial disputes with the Helix Consortium, Queen Zara replied. We have been fighting them for 60 years over mining rights in the outer spiral. Millions of warriors have died and the war grows more expensive each year. What if, instead of fighting them, we could convince them to join us willingly? The Vex commander's eyes widened as he began to understand. You mean to use human methods of alliance building? I mean to learn from humans how to turn enemies into friends, how to inspire loyalty instead of demanding obedience through fear. The human approach to expansion is not weakness. It is a form of strength we have been too proud to recognize. Ben found himself drawn into conversations about engineering practices, maintenance protocols, and quality control systems across the Vex fleet. The Queen's engineers, once they overcame their initial suspicion, proved eager to learn new techniques. Many of their problems stemmed from the same source as the armor issue, fear of admitting that ancient systems needed modern solutions. The problem, explained Chief Engineer Voss, a grizzled Vex veteran, is that questioning the effectiveness of traditional methods is seen as disrespecting our ancestors. But your approach suggests that improvement honors our ancestors by making their creations work better. Ben nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. The engineers who built your queen's armor were masters of their craft, but they didn't have access to the materials and techniques we have today. Using modern improvements doesn't diminish their achievement. It builds upon it. The cultural exchange worked both ways. Ben learned about Vex engineering philosophy, which emphasized durability and redundancy over efficiency. Their equipment was built to function for centuries with minimal maintenance, a valuable approach for a civilization that valued tradition and continuity. Human engineering focuses on optimization and adaptation, Ben observed during one technical discussion. Vex engineering focuses on permanence and reliability. Both approaches have merit, and combining them could produce remarkable results. As the days passed, the initial alliance proposal expanded into something even more ambitious. The two species would establish joint research facilities, exchange technical knowledge, and develop new technologies together. Human flexibility would complement Vex stability, creating innovations that neither species could achieve alone. Queen Zara proved to be a quick learner when it came to human diplomatic methods. Instead of demanding submission from the trade union representatives, she began offering mutual benefits and shared goals. The results were dramatic. Species that had refused to deal with the Vex Empire for decades suddenly became interested in cooperation. "It is remarkable," she observed to Ben during a break in negotiations. "When you approach others as potential allies rather than potential subjects, they respond with far greater enthusiasm." Ben grinned. "Humans figured that out a long time ago. It's usually easier to get people to help you if they want to help you. Your people have much to teach us about more than just engineering," the Queen admitted. "But I believe we have things to teach you as well. Vex discipline and honor codes could help humanity avoid some of the political chaos that seems to plague your colonies." The alliance agreement was signed 3 weeks later, witnessed by representatives from dozens of galactic civilizations. The ceremony took place in the station's main conference hall, with Queen Zara wearing her perfectly repaired armor, as a symbol of the new partnership between their peoples. "This alliance began," she announced to the gathered dignitaries, "when a human engineer chose to fix something that was broken, even though it belonged to a stranger, and even though helping could have cost him his life. This act of selfless competence embodies the best qualities of both our peoples, human compassion combined with Vex honor." Ben watched from the crowd as the documents were signed, still amazed at how his simple repair job had led to such momentous changes. Ambassador Chen had privately told him that the alliance would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. After the ceremony, Queen Zara approached Ben with something that looked like a medal made from the same metal as her armor. "This is the Star of Vex Honor," she explained. "It has never before been awarded to a non-Vex. You have earned it not through combat, but through something perhaps more difficult: the courage to do what is right regardless of consequences." Ben accepted the medal with appropriate ceremony, though he still felt somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. "Your Majesty, I just fixed some broken equipment." Anyone would have done the same thing. Queen Zara's expression grew serious. "No, Bentoris, not anyone would have done what you did. That is precisely why it was so remarkable, and why it changed everything." As the celebration continued around them, Ben reflected on the strange turns his life had taken. 3 weeks ago, he had been a maintenance engineer on a mining station, anonymous and unremarkable. Now he was an honorary advisor to an alien empire, and had somehow helped forge one of the most important alliances in galactic history. The Queen was right about one thing: fixing broken equipment was just the beginning. The real work of building understanding between species would take years of patient effort from thousands of people on both sides. But Ben was confident that it could be done. After all, if there was one thing humans were good at, it was fixing things that were broken. And the relationship between their species had definitely needed some repair work.